Today, I'm going to show you how to clean up and color your animations. And by the end of this video, you'll finally be able to finish those Genga animations you've been creating.
Finally!
So let's continue this Nami animation we were working on in the in-betweening video. Before we begin, I always try to see how many frames do I have to clean up and color. And in this case, I only have 5 drawings to do, which means it's a lot easier to manage with all the layers we are going to put in the cell folder. So, let's start by creating our cleanup folder structure. First, we create the cell folder 1, and under that, we have to create a raster layer and name it as base color. The next layer is a raster layer for the shadow, and I will also create a vector layer and put both in a folder, which I will name then shadow. I will then create a vector layer for the line art and another vector layer called ref lines, which I will set with the layer color red. I also set it as a draft layer, which I eventually regretted later on in the video, but I will explain later. So now once we have the folder structure created, we can now start with the very first step, which is the line art. For the cleanup, I use this No Anti-Alias brush with taper to create my lines. Aside from that, there's really nothing new here that you probably don't know already, but I'll give you some tips on how to do better line art. First is to use your elbows when drawing the lines. It's a lot better when you use your whole arm, especially when drawing those longer strokes. At this point, the Genga drawings should have been already finalized, and all you have to do is to recreate those lines. So you can zoom in as much as you can to make sure you can draw your lines more accurately. You can also adjust the width of your brush to draw thicker black lines like the brow and the lashes of the eye. As long as those lines are black, you should be okay using thicker lines. For those who are asking, I use a thickness of 2 for this one, since it's a close-up, but otherwise you can use 1 for the line thickness. The reason why I am using this No Anti-Alias brush is so that I can see the gaps between pixels that I can easily fill with the black if needed. You can also use a curve tool if you want, and since I'm using a brush that has a taper, I created a curve tool that has similar taper effect when used. I didn't use this curve tool when making the line art for this animation, but I made the curve tool available together with this No Anti-Alias Doga tapered brush that I am using for all of you down in the description below. Don't be afraid to erase parts of your line and then continue it to get the line correctly. You don't actually have to do each of these lines in one stroke. As long as the line work is great, you should still be okay. The last tip I have is to actually maximize the use of vector layers. These lines can be adjusted and edited to make sure it fits perfectly with your Genga drawings. Just select the line with your operation tool and set the method to free transform over here so you can easily just select and edit as you see fit. I actually do this a lot of times throughout the duration of this video. Now that we have completed the line art for the first cell, it's now time to create the rest of the cell to continue doing the rest of the animation. We do this by selecting all the cells in our Genga folder in the timeline and then copy it. We then paste it in our cleans animation folder, which will produce the exact location of the cells that was in our Genga animation folder. However, this doesn't produce the actual layer folders yet, so we have to right-click the clean animation folder in the timeline and select edit track, then create all supported cells. After that, we can now see the same exact folder structure for each of the cells right here. Then it's just a matter of cleaning up the lines one cell at a time. Again, in some of these lines I tend to copy paste and edit some of these lines from my previous frames. I would even copy a line, erase parts of it, and then continue it. Use every possible tool you have to create the lines you need to create. Just make sure that you are drawing your lines on the proper layer, and it's basically the same process as the first cell. I will update the free template for you guys, which you can find down in the description below, so you don't have to create the folder structure I did for this video. After that, I then proceeded to work on my ref layers, which are basically lines that will be invisible, but need to have a separation because it will have a different color inside. Oftentimes, these are the highlights or any lines that you don't want to see between two colors. In this particular animation, it's just basically all the red lines in my Genga. After that, I am now ready to do the base color. For this process to be as smooth and quick as possible, I went to go to each of my cell folder and select base color first. This is to ensure that when I'm flipping between cells, I am instantly at the base color layer, and all I have to do is to use my fill bucket tool. Make sure you have the character design sheet for Nami to get the base color for the character. Then it's just a matter of using this Doga fill tool to do the base color, basically going one color at a time. During this process, I realized how setting up a layer as a draft layer will make this tool ignore those lines. So make sure you don't set any vector layers as a draft layer like I did for the ref lines. For the shadows, I basically set the folder color containing the vector and raster layer to this brown tint right here. This allows me to just use one color for the shadow to make the process simpler, and I'm going to show you how this works later. But first, we just need to work on the lines of the shadow for each of these cells. Make sure the color of your brush is set in black because this would ensure that the color produced will be the same color as the folder layer color we set earlier. Sometimes you would find a Genga cell with no shadows or highlights, and you have to basically make sure you match those cells from before. If you have to use the onion skin or go back and forth between cells, do it so it makes it easier to draw these lines. After the lines are drawn, it's now time to do the fills. It's the same process as the base color, so just do your best to fill in the gaps created by your lines. Now, here's the magic of why I'm doing one color for the shadows. If you set this folder to multiply, this color will suddenly become a darker shade of the color beneath it, which is the base color. So all we have to do is to set all the shadow layers to multiply, and you have an instant shadow for your animation. The last step is basically adding another shadow layer on top, which is the secondary shadows that you see in the Genga, indicated by the green separation line. This is basically the same process as the shadow layer, but we do this on scenes that needs a little bit more emphasis on the lighting. After that, we can now make sure we set the folder to multiply again and turn off all the ref layers, which will now result to this animation. There is actually another way to do a cleanup animation that I use for animations with a lot more frames. I use a very different folder structure over there, but the process is basically the same. But I will make another video about it in the future. For now, I would love to thank these Patreon members as well as everyone who has been supporting the channel since day one. I wouldn't be here without your continued support, so let's continue learning and improve our skills one animation at a time. Feel free to check the videos you see on screen for more videos on how to animate. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.